There's nothing physically wrong with you.
Then why do I feel so awful, so bloated and sluggish? Nothing gives me joy anymore. Not the house, the car, the clothes, the raise. Nothing. Doctor, I'm frightened. Well, do something. Can't you give me a pill?
There's no pill for what's wrong with you. I'm afraid you're suffering from affluenza.
Oh, my God. Why me? Is it fatal?
It's catastrophic. It's the new epidemic.
Well, there is a cure, isn't there?
Possibly.
Affluenza is a major disease. There's no question about it.
And many people suffer from it, but very few people are aware that that's what they're suffering from.
Gotta listen to me, honey, better count all your money, better know just where you stand. If you want to be my date, well, you better get it straight. I'm a big-time shopping man. Yeah, I shop real fast. I buy things that don't last. I pay for stuff that I could get for free. And I'll do it till I die, because I've figured out that life is just a one big shopping spree. Baby, come on. There's a whole lot of shopping going on. Woo! Yeah, let's go to the mall, come on. There's a whole lot of shopping going on. Get that money out of your savings account, come on. There's a whole lot of shopping going on. Woo!
Hi, I'm Scott Simon. Are you spending more now but enjoying it less? Millions of Americans apparently are. We're filling our lives with things and then telling public opinion pollsters and clergy and psychiatrists and friends that we feel empty inside. Never before, it seems, has so much meant so little to so many.
There's a universal feeling in this nation that we've become too materialistic, too greedy, too selfish, too self-absorbed, and that we need to bring back into balance the enduring values that have guided this country over generations.
Some call the affliction affluenza. Untreated, it can cause permanent discontent. Affluenza's costs and consequences for us, for our families and communities, for future generations, and the earth itself are immense, though often concealed.
We human beings, especially in this century, have been producing and consuming at a rate that far exceeds the ability of the planet to either absorb our pollution or replenish the stock.
It's going to hurt a bit.
Affluenza can be cured, but the virus is very contagious.
Why now, day later?
And it's been spreading for quite a while.
I want a Corvette. I want a Pontiac too.
Let's go all out and buy a Cadillac too.
I can hardly wait for this dream to come true.
Are you old enough to remember the 50s, that golden age of prosperity following the Second World War?
It's a great life, eh, Bob? And tomorrow will be even better for you and for all the people.
We felt richer then than we do now. A famous book at the time called America the Affluent Society.
A book whose title would be laughable today. People would reject it, even though we have actually, in terms of gross national product and so forth, more than twice as much. Everybody's home has got twice as much stuff in it.
Back in 1958, only 4% of American homes had dishwashers. Now more than half do. Less than 1% had color televisions. Now it's 97%. And there were no microwaves, VCRs, or personal computers.
Four-car garage is probably because of storage. You never have enough storage. And so, you never have enough garages.
Never enough. So much stuff. So little space. Even though the average new house has grown larger every decade. Now many new homes have three-car garages. Nearly 900 square feet of garage space alone, which is almost the size of an entire home in the 50s.
Oh, darling, it's going to be just perfect.
You're about to enter a beautiful, exciting, wonderful new world. The world of 1960. A wonderful new world of Fords.
In that gilded new world, hardly any new cars had air conditioning. Today, more than 90% do. Economy cars now offer more features than luxury cars did then.
Color's important. I don't worry too much about gas mileage at all. It's not something that I look at.
A lot of money.
Yes, it is.
Today's hottest selling cars are expensive, gas-hungry sport utility vehicles.
A lot of people, it's a status symbol, so they're willing to spend the $30,000 to $40,000 to drive one of these vehicles.
Yes, fun to see, fun to drive, fun to buy. The new Chevrolet.
Just as they did in the 50s, new cars still help us keep up with the Joneses. But these days, we find it more appealing to fly. We fly 25 times as much as we did then. Sometimes we fly just to shop.
Don't just stand there. Give me your credit card.
Well, those East Coast stores really knock me out. They leave the West behind.
Potomac Mills attracts more visitors than any other site in Virginia. This shopping mall is such a popular tourist destination, airlines offer excursion flights here from distant cities. And where are you from?
Dallas area.
Potomac Mills is a discount supermall divided into what are euphemistically called neighborhoods.
Shopping malls have really become the centers of many communities. Children, as well as adults, see a shopping center as just the natural destination to fill a bored life.
70% of us visit malls each week, more than attend churches or synagogues. On average, we shop 6 hours a week and spend only 40 minutes playing with our children.
You shop, spend money. What else matters?
It's a happy-go-spending world, reflected in the windows of the suburban shopping centers where they go to buy.
By 1987, America had more shopping malls than high schools.
950 mugs that were...
Few mall shoppers come with any intention of purchasing a particular product. Most buy largely on impulse.
Oh, party snacks.
As this old sales training film suggests, that's no accident.
And here's that most important store decision of all, the impulse purchase. To make people hungry for as many things as possible. Hungry enough to buy a lot more than they planned to.
Buy the half-price dress. The cocktail party will come. Have you been to Potomac Mills this month?
It was an ingratiatingly clever ad campaign that first lured me to Potomac Mills Mall.
Shopping is therapy. Listen to that little voice in your head. Shop, 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 shop. You can buy happiness. Just don't pay retail for it.
But even wholesale, the price is higher than most of us seem able to afford. In fact, the percentage of Americans calling themselves very happy reached its highest point back in 1957.
The psychological reality of people is that almost our entire orientation to how we are doing is based on comparison. That's why, as an entire society grows, people don't feel any better because they're still in the same relative position. There's the sense of being on an endless treadmill and of never getting to where you thought you were going to get.
Still, we keep on increasing our consumption, partly by saving less and working more.
In our research, we hear the same refrain all the time from people. I have no life. I get up in the morning, daycare, elder care, a 20 to 40-minute commute to work. I have to work late. I get home at night, there's laundry, bills to pay, jam something into the microwave oven. I'm exhausted. I go to sleep, I wake up, the routine begins the next day all over again. This is what life has become in America.
Would Jesus be agenda-driven? I mean, would he carry a beeper? Can you imagine him getting beeped out of the Last Supper?
Richard Swenson, MD. He could be called an affluenza epidemiologist.
If you look at all the countries in the world that have the most prosperity, they are the same countries that have the most stress.
Dr. Swenson is convinced that much of the pain his patients suffer is a result of what he calls possession overload.
It could be physical symptoms. You might have headaches, low back pain, hyperacidity, palpitations in the heart, unexplained aches and pains. It could be emotional problems. I mean, it could be like depression, or it could be anxiety, sleeplessness. You find that your life is being taken up by maintaining and caring for things instead of people. Everything I own owns me.
And we've had a lot of sickness this year, incredible amount of sickness.
Dr. Swenson says Americans in epidemic numbers have been pushed beyond their emotional, physical, and financial limits as they've chased a dream for more.
They have exhaustion and their relationships are vaporizing. They're surrounded by all kinds of fun toys, but the meaning has gone.
The secret to a good relationship can be found in new strawberry kiwi jello.
New improved Trident. Giant slices.
Nourish the furniture you love.
The stuff dreams are made of.
By the age of 20, the average American has seen 1 million commercial messages.
APR 22.65% for best rate.
Ads are everywhere. If you get the feeling that there's a lot more advertising around than there was when you were a kid, it's not your imagination.
Advertising accounts for 2/3 of the space in our newspapers and 40% of our mail. America spends $1 billion a year on billboards alone.
The extreme is the billboard that was proposed for outer space that would project logos that would look about the size of the moon, visible to practically everybody on Earth.
You got a big future ahead of you, kid. You're going to be asked to endorse products.
On average, each of us will spend 1 full year of our lives watching TV commercials.
Advertising encourages us to meet non-material needs through material ends. It tells us to buy their product because we'll be loved, we'll be accepted. And also it tells us that we are not lovable and acceptable without buying their product.
And the bottom line is that it helps turn citizens into consumers.
Attention mall shoppers, there is a clearance at the shoe store.
The process begins in childhood.
There is a sale at the bookstore.
This new game helps whet children's appetites for shopping.
There is a clearance at the kitchen store.
Yes, my favorite store.
The winner is the one who buys the most stuff and gets back to the parking lot first. Saving isn't part of the strategy.
60% of all Americans say that our children are not just materialistic, they're very materialistic.
That's actually good news to some people. Children are the fastest growing segment of the consumer market.
And many major corporations are finding that the consumer lifestyle starts younger and younger. And if you wait to talk to a person about your product till they're 18 years of age, you probably won't capture them.
Obviously, somebody out there is afraid the youngsters might escape. From 1980 to 1995, the amount targeted to reach them rose from $100 million to $1 billion a year. It's paying off. So what'd you get, may we ask?
I got some Donna. Got some Donna Karen, some Gap jeans.
I got a Gap sweater. I'm on my way to get a jacket from American Eagle.
I'm about to get some shoes, and I got me this Donna Karen shirt.
I think that's good. I think that'll really get the message across. Yeah.
Jennifer Galos and Olivia Martin worry that today, teenagers seek self-esteem in clothes and cars and are often left without a genuine sense of identity. While they were high school seniors in Redmond, Washington, Jenny and Olivia wrote a play called Barbie Get Real.
Hey, you're wearing new eyeshadow, aren't you? It looks great.
Thanks. So, what are our plans for today?
Well, first I thought we could go cruising around in your pink Corvette, and then I thought we could hit the mall.
Good idea.
Matt, say that like it's the best idea you've ever had. Be really excited. Let's go cruising.
Jenny and Olivia played Dazzle and Neon, Barbie dolls, whose shallow lives revolve around appearances and shopping. Midway through the play, Neon has second thoughts about her life.
What is wrong with me? I have everything. The right look, the right attitude, the right friends. But I still feel so empty.
Neon is finally making her transformation, her change. So don't let it affect your smile, but still show a lot of anger at her that she's made this outrageous change in her life, and it's hurting you because it was never about her as a person. It was about image. It was about being seen together.
Something happened to me today. I've been feeling so alone, and I don't feel comfortable.
Isn't there a shoe sale next week?
Why are you so afraid to have a real conversation with me? Don't you want to know more about me and who I really am?
I know who you are. You're Neon Barbie, and that's all I need to know.
There's more to me than where I go, who I'm with, and my accessories. At least I wish there was.
There is more to you than that. You're beautiful, too. You drive a great car. You live in a beautiful dream house, complete with your own Barbie bubbling spa. And you're dating me. What else is there?
I'm hollow inside.
Neon, get a hold of yourself. There are people here.
So, how was your date?
Olivia and Jenny began to question the American consumer way of life after a trip to Mexico.
Just the way they live down there is so harsh. They barely have enough food, enough clothes, but they were so giving.
And loving and happy people despite what they had. And you don't see that very many places in America.
The kids in our high school take everything for granted. They think that they deserve it, that they think that somehow they've earned it and the world owes it to them. And, you know, they'll just take and they won't give anything back. And our society's just going to crumble if we don't have people that give.
After performing Barbie Get Real, Jenny and Olivia gave all the money they made to Habitat for Humanity, which builds housing for the poor. They won a national award for their play, but in the marketplace of ideas, they face stiff competition.
Kids love advertising. It's a gift. It's something they want. There's something to be said, by the way, about being there first and about branding children and owning them in that way.
It's called Kid Power, but it's really about selling things to kids.
In boys' advertising, it is an aggressive play pattern. It is.
At conferences like this, marketers discuss the latest strategies for reaching children.
An antisocial behavior in pursuit of a product is a good thing.
Experts have learned a little since the early days of marketing research.
Sociologists, psychologists, and students of behaviorism find in the teenage girl of today a stimulating and almost limitless field of study, but one in which they are lost without expert guidance.
We are endeavoring to evaluate the teenage American girl in terms of her likes and dislikes. What are teenage clothes? What are your group's social habits?
Over the course of the past 10 or 15 years, there's been a great boom in kids' research and kids' marketing. We're going into store aisles and watching them shop with their parents. We're going to their homes, sitting down in the kitchen, sitting in their bedrooms to see how they decorate their rooms. And we're giving them the opportunity or empowering them to be the experts and tell us how they feel.
So kids, get it now. Ask your parents to use their credit cards and call 1-800-BUY-MORE.
I love you, Dad. Can I have this toy?
No.
Oh, just a second. Mom, can I get this toy I saw on TV?
Gabe, we can't have everything we want.
You just don't want me to be happy.
My name's Mr. Smith. That's right, Mr. Smith. It's 4851.
You can't stop me. There's always Grandma.
Simply call it and win.
Ads have always accompanied children's programs, but today's marketing strategies are not limited to television.
Children in this society are a cash crop to be harvested.
Alex Molnar is the author of Giving Kids the Business, a study of the commercial penetration of American schools.
Marketers are attempting to exploit this market very aggressively because schools represent one of the few relatively ad-free environments left in our culture. Parents would be shocked if they saw some of the materials that are sent to schools allegedly to help their children learn. They're nothing more than corporate come-ons.
School children discuss good and bad hair days with materials provided by Revlon. They study geothermal energy by eating Gushers fruit snacks.
It is laughable on its face that corporate executives who go around thumping the tub for world-class academic standards sign off on programs that would seriously propose that children should learn the history of Tootsie Rolls.
Kansas Governor Bill Graves, a Republican, will appoint someone to fill the vacancy maybe as early as next week.
In thousands of American schools, students must watch Channel 1. a daily news program.
And we'll have more Channel 1 news in a minute.
Along with the news comes commercials.
Whoa!
Companies pay up to $200,000 to place a single ad on Channel 1 because they're promised a captive audience of millions of children. Now, commercials are entering America's schools in other ways.
You're not on our bus!
At North Junior High School, they call this the 7-Up bus. It's one of several in the city of Colorado Springs which have ads painted boldly on their sides.
No one else had ever put ads on the sides of school buses. We were the first ones that had ever done it.
Colorado Springs is a prosperous, rapidly growing city, but for years the schools here have been victims of affluenza.
People tend to say, well, I'll buy a boat instead of giving money to the schools. As a matter of fact, the school levy has not passed here for capital since 1972 and for operations since 1969.
School Superintendent Kenneth Burnley turned to advertisers to increase revenues. At Wasson High School, most of the ads are for the snack foods that students are warned against in their health classes.
We are allowing things to creep in one by one that distract from learning. I think there is a great deal more emphasis by students on materialism. I'm afraid the way our nation's going, we are becoming preoccupied with material things at the expense of our children. Do you feel like if you're not wearing the latest, the best, that would hurt your self-esteem or you would be put down?
I do. It's like if you wear something generic and you're walking down the halls, you feel like everybody's looking at you. You notice everybody else wearing Nike and Fila and stuff.
So it is it's a big deal.
Yep.
Of course, many young Americans are adopting consumerism as their credo. So many of the adults they see are already in above their heads.
The wedding was so good we almost have it paid off.
And that's where the whole ball started rolling.
We started out thinking pretty much we could finance the world. And we tried, but didn't work.
The story of the Addams family of Colorado Springs is one that's become all too familiar throughout America.
18, I got a Mervyn's credit card. With that, I managed to get my Visa card. And then Cindy, she managed to get her Visa card. And we ended up with lots of Visa cards to begin with.
Keaton and Cindy Addams married in 1990 and soon began buying lots of things for their home, all on credit.
Furniture, couches, love seat, end table, coffee tables, entertainment center.
What's another $25 a month? I mean, that's a thought process we go through. And then we found ourselves making minimum payments all over the place to the point where we couldn't. And then when we started to get 2 months behind, 3 months behind, the arguments ensued. We started fighting.
They were $20,000 in debt.
We were screaming divorce. Finally, we just ended up reaching a breaking point. They called on the car.
So what'd they say?
Could be $600.
In 90% of divorce cases, arguments about money play a prominent role. But Keaton and Cindy didn't get divorced, they got help when a debt collector referred them to consumer credit counseling.
So you have something set up to repay this debt?
The clients apparently had financed some medical bills.
Can you have them call Chris at Consumer Credit Counseling?
These days, the phones are busy at the Consumer Credit Counseling Service, an international network with hundreds of offices throughout the United States.
When a person comes to Consumer Credit Counseling, the first thing we do is cut up the credit cards. That whole availability and ease of use of credit, I think, makes it real hard for people to remember that they're dealing with real money.
Americans possess more than 1 billion credit cards. Fewer than a third of us pay off our balances each month. Credit card debt tripled in the 1980s.
Not including real estate and mortgages, we're carrying over $1 trillion in debt.
In 1996, more than 1 million Americans declared personal bankruptcy, more than graduated from college.
Do you have money jitters? Ask the obliging Bank of America for a jar of soothing instant money, M-O-N-E-Y, in the form of a convenient personal loan.
When this commercial was made, Americans earned half as much but saved twice as much as they do now. Our personal savings rate is now 4%. By contrast, the Japanese save 16% of their wages.
Okay, got all
Still, for Americans, the message to spend even more is incessant. Credit card offers keep coming, with enticements ranging from temporary low rates to frequent flyer miles.
Thank you.
How are you?
Good. Well,
Each month, Cindy Adams deposits a check at Consumer Credit Counseling to pay off debts. She's learned a hard lesson.
It's okay not to have the newest thing, the latest style. Our home doesn't have to be tip-top 90s condition. Lets us focus on other things that are more important than stuff.
But Cindy and Keaton still feel caught when they think about their children.
Even Brandon at 3 is now going to pick out his 10 favorite things, and Mommy, why can't I have it? And that's just the way things are.
And that troubles Glenn Stanton of Focus on the Family.
The pressure that materialism is bringing to bear on the American family today is woefully underestimated, but it is critically important.
Focus on the Family. This is Kathy. May I help you?
Founded by Dr. James Dobson, whose radio program reaches millions, Focus on the Family is the largest Christian conservative organization in the United States. The political ideology here is free market capitalism, though not without reservations.
The market, in a very real sense, is hostile to the family. It needs to expand itself. It needs to bring in new consumers. And quite tragically, it brings in new consumers almost at any price. Do we go out after a sale, even pitting child against parent? We would contend that that is too far.
Strong families spend time together, but that's less common in our consumer society, even when parents are not working.
Come on, keep going, keep going. Mom's upstairs watching a movie on the VCR. Dad is on the internet. Kids are downstairs playing video games. Everybody is connected to something outside of the home, even though they're physically within the home.
New Life Church is less than a mile from Focus on the Family. Sunday services here attract thousands of evangelical Christians.
The Bible does not say, buy a new Cadillac every year. It says, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content. Now, the message of our day in our society right now is always, always be discontent. I mean, we have tremendous prosperity in our country right now, and we've never probably had so much discontent.
Pastor Ted Haggard, like his neighbors at Focus on the Family, is a free enterprise conservative, but he too feels that consumerism is becoming a poor substitute for family.
The majority of people are rushing, trying to get a little bit more. And that's got to stop. Our kids need it, our wives need it, husbands need it, grandma and grandpa need it. Yes! It is not worth having another 1,000 square feet in your house if you lose the relationship with your wife. Or if your child turns 16 and you realize you never met him. Hey, don't eat the word.
With a little help, Pastor Ted prepares a sermon. For him, being conservative means conserving.
The whole idea of us using a thing and then throwing it away and getting another one, I think is affecting all of us as people. We start looking at other people and we say, if they don't give us pleasure, then they are disposable.
And I think it can't help but carry over into relationships with people that I'm dissatisfied with this. There's got to be somebody better out there.
I see that a lot in my practice where people will come in and say, well, they met someone at work, or, you know, our relationship started at work, and then eventually we divorced our spouses and we got together. And, you know, once the wrapping was off, then it wasn't as new and different and wonderful as it was in the very beginning when everyone was dressed up and powdered and looked perfect. So they go back to the company and find some other toy to play with.
Our community bonds also suffer. The Salvation Army reports difficulty finding volunteer bell ringers. Participation in civic organizations and activities has been declining over the past 20 years.
All our attention is being pulled in the wrong direction. In trying to run that rat race, we don't have the time to volunteer down at the soup kitchen, to volunteer at church, to go visit the old folks' home, to pay some time and attention to people who need us.
Affluenza affects people across all income barriers. People who have a lot but want more then feel themselves almost empty inside once they get more. And people who want for life's basics but still find themselves almost taunted by glittering embellishments. And in recent years, the gap between the two groups has been growing. In fact, the gap between rich and poor Americans is now the widest in any industrial nation.
Low-income people see it as an issue of inequity. How is it that I see all these people around me getting wealthier and wealthier, doing better and better, gaining more and more material goods, at a time when I'm falling farther and farther behind?
If you look carefully at the big consumer boom since the 1980s, I think one of the things you'll find is that it's fairly heavily concentrated in the upper part of the middle class and above.
Felicia Edwards didn't share in the boom. She and her two sons live in a tiny apartment in Hartford, Connecticut. Like millions of low-income Americans, Felicia works full-time and then some, but still struggles to provide for her children.
I try to teach them, you know, the dollar is hard to come by. Well, to me it is. Christmas rolled around, can you buy me this? But whatever I give them, they're fine with it. They don't ask another question. Way zero. Money's not all that important. I mean, we can't buy certain things, but still, we're happy. We're okay with it.
It's Rocco's Modern Life.
Yet Felicia knows her boys frequently feel deprived. Not long ago, one of them begged her for a pair of expensive sneakers.
They were $90. I had to explain to him first that I couldn't afford them, so he wasn't going to get them. But me and his aunt came to a decision that we was going to go half on them, and he got the sneakers.
In our poorest communities, the sense of deprivation is intense.
There was a fellow that I met, and he works with gangs, and I asked him, I said, you know, what's the one thing that you see that's causing a lot of these problems? Without skipping a beat, he said, greed and materialism. He said, these kids, they don't feel like their lives would be worth anything unless they had the hottest product that's being sold in the marketplace.
Soon children throughout the world may feel the same way.
The whole corporate system in the course of globalization is increasingly geared up to bring every country into the consumer society. And there's a very strong emphasis on trying to reach children, to reshape their values from the very beginning, to convince them that progress is defined by what they consume.
Each day, television exposes millions of people in the developing world to the consumer dream, and they are eager to be included. David Corton once believed they could and should. He's worked in Africa, Asia, and Central America for the Harvard Business School, the Ford Foundation, and the Agency for International Development.
My career was focused on training business executives to create the equivalent of our high consumption economies in countries throughout the world. Gradually I came to realize that that wasn't working, it couldn't work. Many people's lives were actually worse off. We were seeing the environment trashed, we were seeing the breakdown of cultures and the social fabric.
1/5 of the world's people live in abject poverty, dying slowly of hunger and disease. Millions of others also desperately need more material goods. Yet were they to consume as much as we do, the result could be an environmental crisis.
There is absolutely no way that everyone in the world can live at that standard of affluence, because the Earth's ecosystem simply will not stand it. Just imagine if every Chinese household had 2 cars.
As this car show in Beijing reveals, they're already on that road. Western products and advertising are pouring into developing countries.
It is creating a groundwork for an incredible global disaster.
Combined with a population explosion not expected to peak for decades, the consumption boom threatens to devour the world's reserves of oil and other resources within the lifetime of our grandchildren. We've set the example.
The American consumer. Each year you consume fantastic amounts of food, clothing, housing, amusements, appliances, and services of all kinds.
Since 1950, Americans alone have used more resources than everyone who ever lived before them. Each of us uses up 20 tons of basic raw materials annually. Only a small fraction gets recycled.
We are ruthlessly cutting down the world's forests, degrading our lands, destroying the climatic systems, all in the quest for money.
We Americans throw away 7 million cars a year, 2 million plastic bottles every hour, enough aluminum cans annually to make 6,000 DC-10 airliners. Our total yearly waste would fill a convoy of garbage trucks long enough to reach halfway to the moon. Our rivers and oceans are already clotted with pollution. Increased emissions of carbon dioxide and other gases accelerate global warming.
Affluenza, that disease of consumerism, is spreading around the world. So it's really critical that we here in North America begin to alter our patterns of consumption and set a better example for the rest of the world of what the good life really is, or none of us are going to have a good life.
According to historian David Shai, the idea that the good life is a simpler, less acquisitive life runs deep in our heritage.
Simplicity is an ancient, even a primordial ideal. The Greeks referred to it as the middle way, that midpoint between luxury and deprivation.
Give me neither poverty nor riches, reads the book of Proverbs. The New Testament is filled with warnings about the dangers of wealth.
So when the Puritans arrived in the New World, one of their major premises was their desire to try to create a Christian commonwealth that practiced simple living.
Waste not, want not, wrote Benjamin Franklin. In colonial America, habits of thrift persisted alongside desires for luxury. Even 19th century Americans still had more respect for thrift than for spendthrifts, and the word consumption meant something different then.
If you go back to Samuel Johnson's Dictionary of the English Language, to consume meant to exhaust, to pillage, to lay rent, to destroy. In fact, even in our grandparents' generation, when someone had tuberculosis, they called it consumption. So up until this century, to be a consumer was not to be a good thing. It was considered a bad thing.
One of the first harbingers of a change of heart was the department store.
Urban department stores came in during the 1880s, basically, to create the sort of place where people would go and kind of lose themselves and meanwhile spend their money.
By the 1890s, wealthy Americans proudly displayed the material signs of their success. Still, not everyone was impressed.
In the late 19th century, there was another major revival of American interest in simple living. Theodore Roosevelt was one of the foremost proponents of a simpler life for Americans during this period. Roosevelt was quite candid in saying that for all of his support for American capitalism, he feared that if it were allowed to develop unleashed, that it would eventually create a corrupt civilization.
As consumer goods began to roll in large quantities from American assembly lines, labor and religious leaders urged that productive new technologies be used to give people more free time instead of more possessions. But business executives feared a lag in consumer demand might send the whole economy crashing down. They claimed that human wants were insatiable and looked to psychology to stimulate spending.
Why feel low? Why be a little guy? Now you can be just as tall as your best girl. Slip into a pair of upsy-daisy shoes. They give you a lift.
After the Great Depression and World War II, a lift was just what Americans wanted. And business was eager to provide it, with a little help from the government.
The new automobiles stream from the factories. Fresh buying power floods into all the stores of every community. Prosperity greater than history has ever known.
Low-interest federal loans and spending on superhighways fueled the suburban housing boom. The expansion of credit made large consumer purchases easier, and the good life became the goods life.
We have the money to spend, and we want all the lovely smelling soaps, lotions, and glamour goo we can get with it. Our egos are best nourished by a well-placed investment in real luxury goods, what you might call discreetly conspicuous waste.
The immediate post-war period does represent a huge change in the kinds of attitudes that Americans have had about consumption.
Convenience was the new ideal, disposable the means. Use it once and throw it away. Families were encouraged to buy a new car every year. Marketers called it planned obsolescence. Products became obsolete, because they were out of style, whether they still worked or not.
They were saying, the car that you had last year won't do anymore, and it won't do anymore because it doesn't look right. There's now a new car, and that's what we want to be driving.
Consumer society was triumphant, but not without critics. In the 1960s, a small but vocal counterculture called for a simpler way of life. Then in 1974, a nationwide oil shortage caused many people to wonder if we might run out of resources. And by 1979, even our president was questioning the American dream.
Too many of us now tend to worship self-indulgence and consumption.
Part of Jimmy Carter's failure was his lack of recognition of how deeply seated the high, wide, and handsome notion of economic growth and capital development had become in the modern American psyche.
Since Mr. Carter lost by a landslide, no presidential candidate has dared challenge the goal of infinite economic growth.
'Tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the gift to come down where you ought to be.
Bill Clinton and Al Gore appreciated the sentiments contained in this old Shaker hymn, but they pledged to grow the economy faster than their opponents could.
And in Bob Dole and Jack Kemp's opinion, we should aim at doubling the size of the American economy in the next 15 years.
When Jack Kemp offered that opinion, his debate opponent, Vice President Gore, never questioned whether it would really be a good idea for Americans to consume twice as much as they do now. Now, I know what you're going to say. This won't hurt, right?
Wrong.
Ouch. I'm calling my lawyer. Shots sting, but they're supposed to help. Now, there is no shot for affluenza, but help is possible. And if you stay with us, we'll tell you about it after this message.
The average North American consumes 5 times more than a Mexican, 10 times more than a Chinese person, and 30 times more than a person from India. We are the most voracious consumers in the world.
If you've never seen this uncommercial before, it's not for lack of effort to get it on the air.
All the major networks in North America have rejected just about all of our television uncommercials.
That hasn't stopped these activists in Vancouver, British Columbia from producing them. They organize an annual event called Buy Nothing Day as a protest against consumer culture.
Consumerism and overconsumption is really the mother of all our environmental problems.
Kalle Lawson, who was a market researcher until a sudden change of heart, is the publisher of a magazine called Adbusters. It's filled with slick parodies of real ads. But his real dream is to get uncommercials on commercial television.
Take back your children.
I think that commercial television is the command center of our consumer culture.
Why are 9 out of 10 women dissatisfied with some aspect of their own bodies?
Many of the uncommercials are designed by refugees from the advertising industry.
Clandestinely, they come and they help us to come up with our environmental and other kind of messages which are trying to use television to change the world for the better. Invading the command center of consumerism with some very, very powerful antiviruses.
It's coming. The end of the age of the automobile.
Television executives continue to reject the ads, even though the producers are willing to pay for the airtime. Lawson is challenging the rejections in court. But even without television, these adbusters find ways to get their message out.
Hey, we'll put another one up here. Woohoo! Okay, one more.
This year, Buy Nothing Day has exploded. Not only are we in 8 countries around the world, but our phone is ringing off the hook, and it's becoming a truly international celebration of frugality and living lightly on the planet and of voluntary simplicity.
Oh, give aware, be aware, equality for all. Our planet needs humanity, not another mold.
In Seattle, the Buy Nothing Day celebration included music by a group called the Raging Grannies and signs urging passers-by to cut up their credit cards. Several did.
Woo! All right, look at that card getting cut up. It feels so good. Here you go.
And though most shoppers ignored the protest, some found it thought-provoking.
This is a luxurious country. You don't really need it stuff. Like, we just buy stuff because we're in like a commercial society and stuff. I'm able to pass some of these out.
I feel that we're at the early stages of a second American Revolution to reconsider this consumption binge that we've been on for almost half a century now. It's going to keep on gathering momentum, and somewhere along the line, even the economists will come on board.
Consumption really is at the heart of the entire apparatus that we're looking at right now.
As a first step toward improving our quality of life, economists could change the way they measure progress. Critics say the current yardstick, growth of the gross domestic product, or GDP, is severely flawed.
As the economy that Americans experience gets worse, the GDP often portrays it as better.
Take a family going through divorce, for example.
First, they have costly legal bills. Then they establish two households instead of one household. Buying and spending goes up considerably, but meanwhile, what you have is family breakdown.
The more we pay the cost of affluenza, the healthier the GDP says we are.
Every time a forest falls, the GNP goes up. With every oil spill, the GNP goes up. Every time a new cancer patient is diagnosed, the GNP goes up.
We're amassing a large...
Ted Halstead and his colleagues have developed a different measurement of economic success, the GPI, or Genuine Progress Indicator.
The GPI takes into account 24 aspects of our economic lives that the GDP ignores. They start with, for example, the value of housework and volunteerism. We add for that. We subtract things like the cost of crime, the cost of car accidents, the cost of family breakdown.
While GDP continues to rise, the GPI has been falling since 1973.
Meaning that by this measure, the overall costs of increased economic activity are starting to outweigh the benefits. There's now a gnawing sense that we're passing on a world of social, environmental, and economic debt to our children.
Joe Dominguez would agree, and for more than 20 years, this former stock market analyst has been doing something about it.
When I was on Wall Street, I saw that people that had more money were not necessarily any happier. They had just as many problems as the folks that lived in my ghetto neighborhood where I grew up. So it began to dawn on me that money didn't buy happiness, a very simple finding.
So Joe tried frugality. He found he enjoyed life more, and he saved so much he was able to retire early and live on his interest. And he taught other people how to cut their spending. Vicki Robin was one of them.
I found that I needed to learn how to fix things, and I became fascinated with living life directly and developing my skills and capacities and ingenuity rather than just earning more and more money and throwing money at problems. We have so confused standard of living with quality of life.
Soon Vicki, too, was teaching workshops about using money wisely. In time, the workshops led to a popular audio cassette course, a charitable foundation, and a best-selling book called Your Money or Your Life.
It's not about making a killing. It's not about how to buy real estate with no money down or anything of that sort. It's simply how to handle your existing paycheck in a much more intelligent way than the way that you've been handling it.
That means carefully re-examining your spending habits and asking if what you buy is really worth the extra working hours it will cost you.
It's the stuff that our grandparents knew. You know, her grandma read the book before it came out. And after she read, the next day she came into us and said, "You're going to publish this? Everyone knows this. You're crazy." After only 3 months, my spouse and I are out of debt. We have become more at peace with money in our life. This was in Portland.
But thousands of readers have found the book to be a revelation. They follow its 9-step program and find themselves lowering their expenses by an average of 25%.
The correspondence that we've gotten indicates that people from every income bracket are using this program.
Obviously, the steps will be far more fruitful, far more effective for people in the lower income brackets, simply because they're the ones who need to know how to stretch a buck.
Oh, good point, Vicki, good. Good point, got that.
Joe Dominguez and Vicki Robin each live comfortably on $7,000 a year while donating all royalties to their foundation. Other Americans are finding their own ways to live better with less. One solution is co-housing. In Portland, Oregon, several families have come together to form the ongoing co-housing community.
Yeah.
Each family has its own home, but they grow food together, take care of each other's children, and often share meals. They buy groceries in bulk and lower their expenses in various ways. A recent study found that co-housing families use half the energy and produce only half as much waste as typical households. Members of the ongoing community have made a voluntary decision to live with fewer possessions. According to a 1995 poll, 86% of those Americans who have voluntarily cut back their consumption say they are happier as a result. Interest in voluntary simplicity now extends even to the corporate world.
My name's Lita, and I think my life is simply too complicated.
My life has become so chaotic, I have trouble sorting things out on a daily basis, and I really thought this might help.
If you take the simplicity course and you take it seriously, then you'll have more than enough time to do anything that's important to you.
When Dick Roy of the Northwest Earth Institute ran a workshop on voluntary simplicity at Nike's Portland headquarters, 100 people gave up their lunch hour to attend. Nearly all joined long-term study groups hoping to change their lives.
Study circles are beginning to develop, newsletters, magazines, internet resources on the computer, and so on, and that is now beginning to create a culture of simplicity, a culture of ecological living.
If trend watcher Gerald Salenti is right, it's a culture with growing appeal.
In our 17 years of trend tracking, never before have we seen an issue that is gaining such global acceptance as voluntary simplicity. In 1996, we estimate about 5% of the baby boom population are practicing a very strong form of voluntary simplicity. By the year 2000, we estimate that number is going to be up to 15%. They're finding a cure for affluenza. They get rid of their stress, and they say, you know, I like living like this a lot better. How did I live like that before?
And it's not just boomers. Salenti sees growing evidence that young Americans are also beginning to rebel against consumerism.
Today's teens and preteens are going to be tomorrow's revolutionaries. They're going to be very anti-materialistic.
These young activists hope he's right.
You're stupid, you're ugly, you're not.
From around the living simply and assuring a future for all generations to come. It need not be a future of deprivation. Studies suggest that the Earth could sustain a standard of living nearly as comfortable as our own for every human being on Earth. But that would demand social as well as personal change. It would mean investing in non-polluting, energy-efficient technologies, producing goods that last longer and require fewer resources, carefully reusing and recycling, rewarding frugality while penalizing waste, narrowing the gap between rich and poor, committing ourselves to economic stability instead of infinite expansion.
Your mouth feels clean, your throat refreshed, as cool and as clean as a breath of fresh air.
A generation ago, Americans watched ads like this and nobody laughed. Attitudes about smoke have certainly changed. Today, with growing evidence that overconsumption may also be hazardous, it's time perhaps for another attitude adjustment. And what might we gain? Stronger families and communities, shorter working hours and less stress, a better way of life. Think about it. Think about all the money we spend to fight various diseases. And then remember, affluenza is one malady we can cure by spending less money, not more. Thanks for being with us. I'm Scott Simon.
The preceding program was made possible by a grant from the Pew Charitable Trust.
Funding for Escape from Affluenza was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the Summit Charitable Foundation, the Merck Family Fund, and the Pew Charitable Trusts.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin.
This is Roberto Di Nero with a shocking development to report. Those are the Joneses, the American family we've all been trying to keep up with for years. But as you can see by the white flag, they are surrendering.
We've had it. We're exhausted. We never see each other anymore. And we have so much debt, it's just not worth it. So please, stop trying to keep up with us.
So what's next?
We're just going to try living better on less.
And there you have it, the Joneses surrender.
I'm Wanda Urbanska. About 10 years ago, my husband, Frank Levering, and I decided to call a halt to keeping up with the Joneses. The cost was too high. The long hours we had to work to pay for it all meant we hardly ever saw each other. We were successful writers, but we weren't happy. At the suggestion of Frank's elderly parents, we moved here to the Blue Ridge Mountains to take over the orchard that had been in their family for generations. It was a big gamble because the orchard was deep in debt. Making it profitable again meant we had to learn frugality in a hurry. It wasn't always easy, but we found living simply to be full of rewards. Time was the biggest. Time for family, friends, community affairs, and good conversation. Farm work is hard but seasonal. We still had time to write, and we wrote a book called Simple Living about our experiences. The response we got told us we weren't alone. In the 10 years since Frank and I left the fast lane for a simpler life, we met many other people who are finding ways to live better on less. You'll meet some of them too a little later in this program. But first, some history.
5 experts say millions of Americans have fallen victim to a debilitating disease called affluenza. Symptoms include swollen expectations, shopping fever, chronic stress, fractured families, festering social scars, and resource exhaustion. Affluenza is a painful addiction to the relentless pursuit of more, and if not treated, can lead to perpetual discontent. Experts believe affluenza will become a household word as the epidemic continues to spread.
Surveys show that most Americans, regardless of income, think they'd find happiness if they only had twice as much money as they do now. But they also show we're no happier now than we were 40 years ago when we only had half as much or less.
People feel sad, and what do? They go to the mall and they shop. And they buy a boombox, and it makes them feel better, but it only makes them feel better for about a week. And after that, they're still sad, and they have the boombox sitting on the shelf or something. Stop, 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 stop.
Hard Rock Cafe, Las Vegas. You were in Las Vegas?
Right. And I bought a T-shirt, and as you can see, I didn't even take it out of the bag.
People usually lose their shirts in Las Vegas, Mr. Brittany.
At a public forum in Chicago, 40 people have been brought together by an organization called the Center for a New American Dream to discuss their buying habits. They were randomly chosen by a polling firm to represent the region's diversity. All were asked to bring one item they'd purchased but didn't really need.
This is the incredible food dehydrator, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's quite a little item.
Well,
Tell us how you happened to acquire it.
It was on TV. Credit card 800 number and UPS, and I'm in business.
Well, no, they're in business.
Yes, they are, and that was it. And the thing was, I think I spent more time cleaning it than I actually did using it.
So you didn't get up of a given morning and say, you know, honey, we really need a dehydrator.
No, but I do this all the time. My wife and I do it. We have, our whole kitchen's filled with things.
Sounds like we could have your whole kitchen on the table here.
In my garage, too, I've got everything. You know, everything, yeah. Yeah, we just buy everything we can.
Soon, most of these products are likely to end up in a landfill.
When I first started working here, I was really amazed at the amount of material that people threw away. A lot of things I thought could be salvaged and reused. You get carpeting, sofas, chairs, tables, and over here is a lawnmower, a computer monitor, kitchen sinks, and whatever.
This in a city, Seattle, with one of the highest rates of recycling in America. Even here, the piles of stuff simply thrown away keep growing.
Recycling has been a real success. We're proud of, but it's partial. We don't want to lean that far on it because really the big success story would be preventing the waste in the first place.
Just how much does a typical middle-class American consume? In 1990, Sid Quarrier tried to figure that out by adding up everything his family had used in the previous 20 years.
You used to eat M&Ms almost every day. Did you figure that in?
3 bags of M&Ms per week is 3,000 bags of M&Ms. 2 pounds of beef a week, that's 4,000 pounds.
Quarrier shared his calculations with Alan Williams, a colleague at the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection.
6 radios, 1 VCR, 3 alarm clocks, 2 stereo systems, 700 batteries, 3.5 tons of newspaper, 10,000 gallons of heating oil, 3 televisions. It just goes on and on.
As they examined the resources required by Sid's middle-class lifestyle, he and Alan were astonished.
And what frightened me is that both Sid and I consider ourselves environmentalists, and that if we were using these resources, what about the rest of the world? What about the rest of America?
Some scientists up in Canada recently figured out that to support all the world's people at the North American level of consumption, we'd need 4 planets. In other words, we're 3 planets short.
In the name of convenience, we've gone from designing products so they could be repaired to a reliance on throwaways.
25 years ago, the large bulk of footwear was resolvable or repairable. Everybody had their footwear repaired. It was automatic. And now things just don't get repaired anymore. The little corner shoe repair shop, the 1- and 2-man shops that everybody used to go to, they're virtually disappearing. People just have gotten used to throwing footwear away.
And a lot of other things. Despite recycling, the average American throws away a ton of solid waste each year. And for every ton that ends up in the landfill, another 20 tons were originally used up to produce it.
Everything that we buy or use in our daily life has an ecological wake that ripples out across the ecosystems of the planet. I start my day with a cup of coffee. That coffee started as 100 beans growing on a tree in Colombia, in an area that was once cloaked with cloud forests, a kind of tropical forest that's now among the most endangered types of tropical ecosystems. The beans were picked by a worker who made about $1 a day. They were shipped on a freighter made of steel from Japan, out of iron from Australia, fueled with diesel from Venezuela. Then the beans were unloaded in New Orleans, where they were roasted over flames of natural gas piped in from Oklahoma. The beans were then loaded in a 4-ply bag of 3 types of plastic resin and aluminum foil from the Columbia River system in Washington State. They were shipped across the country on an 18-wheeler, brought home from a grocery store in a brown paper bag made of Douglas fir trees from Western Oregon. They were ground in my kitchen in a grinder made in Taiwan with parts from 6 other countries. Then they were brewed in a coffee maker that was made originally in Germany out of parts from a bunch of other countries. The water came from the slopes of the Cascade Mountains, and the electricity came from a dam on the Columbia River. Then I enjoyed my cup of coffee.
Over the past 10 years, Frank and I have thought a lot about how much we use. We try to live by the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. I still wonder sometimes, though, how much we consume. I haven't tried to add it all up, though, like Sid Quarrier did. Maybe it's because I'm afraid I'd be as shocked as he was. But for Gene and Dick Roy, the numbers would look very different.
At some point, things do have to level off if we're to live on a sustainable basis. Hi, Kathy, this is Dick.
The office Dick Roy works in isn't nearly as spacious as his old one, and his salary doesn't come close to what he once earned. In fact, he's now paid nothing at all. Dick is the founder and director of the Northwest Earth Institute in Portland, Oregon.
Our goal was to be a resource for people and allow them to adopt habits and values that would be more earth-friendly and more sustainable.
Dick Roy has always been a leader, officer in the Navy, top of the class in law school, and then top of the city, a corporate attorney whose office looked out on all of Portland. He could have lived in luxury, but the woman he married wouldn't have it that way.
I didn't want to live in a way that would harm the earth.
Gene started with kind of a lifestyle oriented toward frugality and simplicity, and then I came out kind of philosophically, you might say.
So despite their substantial income, the Roys lived simply, dressing their children in second-hand clothes, going camping and backpacking on their vacations, using a clothesline instead of a dryer. Their neighbors thought them a little strange, but
A lot of our friends have taken on our values. I've noticed that through the years. I did feel different at times. You know, my friends would tease me. They would tease me about having an old used bicycle, but I just had to accept that. And
what Jean wouldn't accept were the long hours that corporate attorneys usually put in. She insisted that Dick be home for dinner and make time for his family.
As a lawyer, I always had some of the lowest billable hours in our firm, and so by choice, I simply worked lower hours. And what I found in the firm was that if you practiced law very well and your relationships were good, that the hours were not essential.
Eventually, though, Dick Roy grew tired of corporate law. His children were grown, and he wanted to do something that more directly expressed his values, especially his concern for the environment. So, at the age of 53, Dick Roy left his career for his calling.
As each of us do some little bit each day, the collective impact of that can be immense.
Volunteers from the Northwest Earth Institute conduct seminars on simple living in many of Portland's largest corporations. Already, thousands of people have taken their courses.
We simply give people a chance to stop, take the time to consider their values and habits and how those are affecting the earth.
first you have to decide to do it and be willing to spend a little extra time at first. If you get into habits where you always have your bag, you can save 500 packages a year.
Jean Roy is also an active volunteer. A leader in Portland's recycling program, she often teaches other people how to reduce resource and energy use in their homes.
One of the changes that we've made over the years is getting to a point where we create almost no waste.
The Roys compost food waste using a warm bin. They carefully reuse paper and discourage junk mail by sending it back.
So that's going to go back too, along with this.
Yeah, make sure you get everything in it that they sent to us.
Okay.
And they'll pay the postage.
Amazingly, the Roys fill only a single garbage can with trash in an entire year. In their efforts to live sustainably, Dick and Jean Roy may represent the extreme, but they insist they aren't sacrificing anything.
If you ask people what kinds of activities bring them pleasure, it's usually contact with nature, things that are creative, and relationships with people. And so, you know, the things that we do to live simply bring us all those satisfactions.
I've met people like the Roys throughout the United States, but in one city more than most, the frugal lifestyle is winning widespread respect. Talk about the economy in this booming city, and you're bound to come around to Microsoft, the local software giant. In the past 15 years, hundreds of Microsoft employees have become millionaires. Ron Simons might have become one too, but his life took a different turn.
I'm trying to watch my weight, and I'm watching it go up. I know, and this is where you need to eat these. Put your mouth around some of these right here.
Ron is a regular volunteer at Seattle's Bailey Boucher House, a home for people with AIDS.
How's life in the fast lane?
Not long ago, Ron had no time to volunteer for anything. He was a manager at Microsoft, a company where long working hours are almost a religion.
Well, I come in sometimes on Wednesdays as well as my Tuesdays just to say hello. It was not uncommon to work 11 or 12 hours, 5 days a week, and then come in 5 or 6 hours, on a weekend per day. So my life pretty much was Microsoft.
Financially, it was a very good life for a young man from inner city Detroit who was the first in his family to earn a college degree.
I went to Columbia, and to get to Columbia from the airport, you have to drive through Harlem. And you realize, my God, my people are, the drama that they're going through and the pain and the suffering that's going on. And then you arrive at this Ivy League campus with ivy growing up the sides of the walls. And you could get a lot of them thinking, well, this is what, life is all about. It's like being at this really prestigious institution and learning all these great things about business. But it's not.
As he climbed the corporate ladder, Simons grew tired of endless conversations about making money.
For a long time, I was thinking, there's something missing in my life.
He often thought about his grandparents in Detroit.
My grandmother in particular was one of the most philanthropic women that I had known in my life. I mean, not only did she, give money to her church, but she volunteered and helped people through organizations that she got involved in, but also individually. My grandfather was all that in a bag of chips. He would give you the shirt off his back. And so that whole model was what I was used to.
And Ron had another dream. He'd always wanted to be an actor, but it took courage to leave the security of his career.
It was hard. I mean, it was sleepless nights and
Finally, offered yet another promotion, Simons resigned from the company instead. The first reaction he faced was fury.
My mother thought I was crazy when I told her that I was leaving Microsoft to become an actor. She said, "You were doing what? Lord have mercy, Jesus."
Ron Simons has become an actor. It isn't easy. He's just beginning to do meaningful roles instead of commercials.
I like baseball.
But he's patient. He lives frugally, and he finds enormous satisfaction in the volunteer work he now has time for.
I really had that opportunity to fulfill that dream, to really give back, and man, I went out there. I mean, I just got involved in stuff. All right, nice save.
Besides volunteering at the Home for AIDS patients, he reads to the blind, uses his business skills to help nonprofit organizations, and serves on several local boards. But he especially cherishes the time he spends as a big brother for a boy named Andrew.
We spend 4 to 5 hours a week together. He lives with his mom, and he's a big sports fanatic. And spending a couple hours throwing the ball around is good exercise for me. My getting involved in the volunteer side of things has just been very, very fulfilling. We need to get out of this rat race and get a real life.
Not everyone chooses to downshift like Ron did. In the past decade, thousands of Americans were downsized, laid off when the companies they worked for cut labor costs to increase profits. Fred Brown was one of them.
I think if someone were to look at how I was living, they would say, he's really got everything going. Beautiful family, beautiful home, beautiful job.
But the beauty was superficial. Though Fred was earning 6 figures a year as a corporate personnel manager, his life wasn't as wonderful as it appeared.
The so-called good life was coming at, for me, a pretty significant price.
He worked long hours and found little time for his wife and 2 daughters. And his job was stressful. It was his responsibility to tell other employees they'd been laid off. Eventually, his marriage broke up. Then, his own job was downsized.
When I found out I was laid off, it was a shock to me. It's a different experience on the receiving end than on the giving end. The most difficult wasn't the financial letting go. It was the letting go of what I thought was what I was supposed to do with myself.
So at first, he looked unsuccessfully for new opportunities in his field. He could have found them in another part of the country, but he realized he hadn't been happy in his career.
There came a point where I knew I simply had to take the step off the cliff into the unknown.
Fred went back to school and studied massage therapy. His new line of work was far less lucrative than what he'd been used to.
I was faced with going from $100,000 down to $20,000 in income. And the question, obviously, is, well, how are you going to support a lifestyle, a $100,000 lifestyle on $20,000? And the answer is you don't.
So Fred moved to an apartment, sold most of his possessions, and was forced to live on a whole lot less. Ironically, he's still paying off debts he ran up when he was earning 5 times as much.
But I'm not generating debt. I'm not spending more than I'm making. I'm finding I can make the ends meet. I have more opportunity to be present with my family now. And it turns out that for me, living simply seems to be leading to more happiness. You know, wow, what a concept. I am thankful now that I was laid off because I'm doing something that I love. It's what the Buddhists like to call right livelihood. It feels to me like I have found my right livelihood.
Though his home is only a few blocks from a Seattle neighborhood that calls itself the center of the universe, Ming Chen and his family live humbly.
The Lord is good to us. Amen.
Their simple lifestyle is a result of a decision they made years ago when the company Ming worked for transferred him to a job designing weapons he was morally opposed to.
And I said, well, I'm not going to accept the transfer, so you can do with me what you will.
Like Fred Brown, Ming returned to school and changed careers. Now he works at a treatment center for alcohol and drug abusers. He puts in 3 10-hour days each week and is on call for emergencies. Ming's wife, Karen Schneider Chen, doesn't work for pay, but she keeps a busy schedule. Karen volunteers at a shelter for battered women and several other community organizations, including a food bank and the Baby Boutique, a thrift store providing clothes for children from low-income families.
It is important to us that we have time being involved in the community and time for neighbors and helping out older people in our neighborhood. I feel very energized by just about everything I do.
Daddy, the light in the living room is out.
With 3 children and only 1 paycheck, Ming and Karen have to be frugal.
Yeah, we live in an old house and there's always work to be done to fix it up and preserve it.
This piano came from my grandparents' house because my mama played it when she was a girl. Now I play it. And then this chair over here, we had to reupholster it. It was a really ugly yellowish, brownish color. And I think it came from my mama's grandma. And then the couch, I think that came from my grandparents' house.
Ready?
On one of his days off, Ming and daughter Stephanie run errands. They buy used books, then return them to a local bookstore for credit toward other purchases. When Ming's toaster stopped working, he didn't discard it.
I actually was on the verge of going out and buying a new toaster oven. I had just assumed that anything electrical was going to cost more to repair than it would to buy a new one.
But at a local repair shop, he got the toaster fixed for a fraction of the price of a new one.
That was a choice that resulted in a conservation of resources and supported a small business in our community.
For Ming and his family, saving resources and supporting the community are more important than simply saving money.
A lot of the products that we buy actually don't save money.
For example, they buy organic food, recycled paper, and union-made goods.
It's a process of trying to figure out how to live your life in a way that's consistent with your values. Whenever we face making a decision about how to use our money or our time, we have to take those values into account.
Still, they do find ways to keep expenses down. They buy food in bulk at a local cooperative, reducing both costs and packaging. They cook from scratch instead of using more expensive processed foods. For much of the year, their garden provides fresh produce.
Dinner time.
They raise chickens in their backyard, feeding them kitchen scraps.
It reduces the bulk of our garbage and cuts our garbage bill besides, so we can get away with a micro can. And it generates fertilizer to enrich the soil for our garden without having to rely on chemical fertilizers.
We enjoy chickens because they kind of humanize the city, and people in the neighborhood really enjoy them. They kind of link us more to the community. And we get eggs, beautiful eggs, all different colors.
They also save money by driving as little as possible.
I realized that every gallon of gasoline emits 5.5 pounds of carbon dioxide, which is responsible for global warming. And I think it's really important for us to think of alternatives to the car.
Okay, so the next chapter is called Go to the Raft.
Most evenings, family members gather in the living room to spend time together. For Karen and daughter Susanna, it's often a time to make or repair clothes.
It just feels really important to come together after dinner and have kind of a smooth transition into bedtime. We've done that for so many years. It's part of our rhythm of our family life.
But like all families, this one has its conflicts. Daughter Emily, who is 15, is uncomfortable with her parents' passion for simple living.
I watch more TV, that's for sure. And I avoid the house a lot because it's boring. And I eat more junk food.
It's been difficult, but some of what's going on right now is stuff that any child her age has to go through. All I can do is demonstrate my values, and I can only hope that will have an effect on her and the choices she makes.
We felt like, it really is important that we respect her wishes too.
As he commutes to work by bicycle, Ming Chen often rides through heavy traffic. That's something David Galvin doesn't have to worry about. Galvin found freedom in more ways than one when he, his wife, and 2 children moved from a 2,000 square foot home to an 800 square foot houseboat.
We're trying to live with 4 of us now in the 800 square feet, and it makes it nice and cozy. We had to get rid of a lot of clutter, and we just ended up with the things that are really important to us down here, and that makes a big difference.
On most days, David has a commute that would make anyone envious. He can get to work almost as fast by kayak as by car without consuming energy or creating pollution.
And it's such a great way to get to work because I don't have to deal with traffic, of course. It changes the whole day for me. It gets me more in touch with the environment, which is what I do for my living, too. I work on water quality and hazardous waste and things like that, so it's really important to me to feel that connection. The exercise helps, too. It's a pretty good workout.
What are you learning through the practice of keeping track of your expenses, just by writing them down?
It's the little things. And I think I always knew that, but the extent to which that was true was kind of shocking.
A little latte or something every other day, and before you know it, you look at it for a whole year, and that's a couple $100 worth of caffeine just gone down the drain.
At the office, Galvin finds kindred spirits who share his interest in scaling down. Several of them meet regularly at lunchtime for a study group based on a popular guide to frugality called Your Money or Your Life.
I've been struggling with my van. I'm spending $600 a month on that stupid thing to get to and from work.
Can't you use a car that gets great gas mileage that doesn't cost?
I bought it because I wanted to haul a lot of kids around, and we go camping. But I don't haul kids around that much, and we go camping 2 or 3 times a year. I think I can figure something else out.
To follow the program, they must write down every expenditure.
I tend not to spend as much money. I always think, oh, I'm going to have to write this down, and so do I really want to spend it? And I find that really has helped.
Evie McDonald wrote the workbook that David Galvin and his colleagues have been using to simplify their lives.
Purpose.
Shortly afterwards, she met a couple whose ideas moved her deeply. Joe Dominguez was a former stockbroker, Vicki Robin a former actress. Believers in frugality and simple living, they taught others how to get out of debt, save money, and spend their life energy on improving the world.
What I felt was that their work was so important that I wanted to join forces with them.
For over 15 years, Evie has been working with Vicki and Joe, who died in 1997, to promote more frugal and sustainable lifestyles.
The nice thing about voluntary simplicity is that it looks so benign. We look so harmless, you know? Somebody said we're the Trojan horse of change. We'll just sneak right in and they won't notice it. They'll think all those sweet people gathering to talk about simplifying their lives. And then suddenly we will burst out and transform everything.
Ask anyone in Seattle about simple living and they're likely to send you to this woman.
Yes, you're a big help, Maggie.
Cecile Andrews is the author of Circle of Simplicity, the story of the voluntary simplicity study circle movement she started.
I was a community college administrator for a long time, and I was always looking for some sort of class that would lure people out of their homes. And I had tried then a class on voluntary simplicity in 1989, and 4 people signed up, so we had to cancel. And then we did it again 3 years later for a variety of reasons. And that time we got 175.
Who's got the egg timer? You want to start?
Cecile organized small groups called study circles instead of lectures. Participants begin with a simple reading list, but much of the discussion is about their own personal experiences.
Dave and I have been making a concerted effort to get more connected in our neighborhood.
There's a sense in study circles that you're there to really change your life. The experience in itself changes you, and the reason it changes people is because people talk about their own stories. Why they're here. They have no time, they're working too much, they have no fun, they're not laughing anymore.
We're counting on you to bring your baby to our voluntary simplicity meeting.
Well, I already have.
Group members pledge to make changes in their lives, receiving reinforcement and practical advice from the other participants.
I think the thing I would venture to commit to would be to get to know a few new neighbors, to at least go say hello and let them know that if they need anything like tools or somebody to watch their house or something, that they can certainly call on us.
Neat.
I think I can stick my neck out that far.
Cecile Andrews believes support groups like this one make it easier for people to change their spending habits.
It's putting positive things in place of the negative things. It's saying the way I kind of fill up this emptiness is not by denying myself something, it's by figuring out what I really need, and I need community, I need creativity, I need some sort of passion in my life, I need connection with nature. And so people help each other figure that out as well.
Oh, wow, look at this. Here's one of the really rare plants of the wetland. Here is the small water parsnip, Variola. It's things like this that really excite me because it instills in you some sense of awe and wonder. And I think the awe and wonder is really the thing that we're missing today.
When Cal DeWitt looks for a little excitement, he goes to the marsh instead of a movie or a mall.
This kind of awe and wonder you carry with you.
He can identify more than 80 birds that live in this wetland by their calls alone. He marvels at the flight of sandhill cranes, the texture of grass, and the work of beavers.
From the break of dawn to noon, on through to the setting sun, and then on into the night, there are absolutely dramatic changes. As you stand for a while, things begin to unfold if you're quiet enough to watch and listen. And after a full day, you're not tired either. You tend to be exhilarated from the experience. But perhaps most curiously of all, you come home with your wallet just as full as when you left. And you've gotten all this pleasure, education, understanding, peace for not a single penny. One also begins to understand something about how the world works. Perhaps the most dramatic thing we learn is how much human society, our current human society, works at cross purposes with the very principles that we learn here in a wetland. We tend to see the world as a one-way flow, from producer to consumer to trash bin to landfill. And here, everything is recycled. When a stalk of the cattails drops down into the marsh, it's just converted again into soil.
For 11,000 years, since the end of the last ice age, Waubesa Marsh has been working like that. All things in the marsh are part of the cycle of life. Nothing is wasted. Cal DeWitt walks through these wetlands with a certain sense of satisfaction. 25 years ago, this marsh was threatened by development. At the time, Cal was chairman of the tiny township of Dunn, Wisconsin.
We declared a moratorium on all land division in our town for 2 years, and we came up with a stewardship plan.
They stopped unplanned urban growth at the edge of Waubesa Marsh and worked together to restore the already damaged wetland to its natural state. Cal DeWitt is something of an anomaly. A scientist and professor of environmental studies at the University of Wisconsin, he is also a theologian and a deeply religious man.
The scriptural teachings really are kind of turned on their head by our modern consumption philosophy. Consume more, then you will be happy. The scriptural view is honor God, take care of creation, deal your bread to the hungry, and then joy comes as a byproduct of service. We try to short-circuit that in our modern society by pursuing first joy, and of course we miss it.
Our consumer culture teaches us that newer is better. That car, that computer, that outfit you bought, that one you've had for 2 months, it's out of date. You need a new one. One problem with being preoccupied with the new is it keeps us from learning from and appreciating our past. Here at the Orchard, where my husband's roots go back generations, I've been inspired to think about our culture's roots. Many of the first American colonists were seeking to build a society based on the plain living and spiritual devotion they found lacking in their homelands. It wasn't long, though, before traders began to report brisk sales of luxury goods to the colonies. The Puritans passed a series of laws to require simple living. These failed largely because they were applied unfairly. You could wear whatever you wanted if you were rich. The Quakers were somewhat more successful in fending off materialism. They excommunicated slave owners and denounced unfair treatment of Indians and other byproducts of greed. In some ways, the American Revolution itself was a simple living movement. Affluenza was coming to a head in England. The rich spent half the day dressing and gorged on dinners that took 7 hours to eat. The British bled their colonies to pay for this life of luxury, with taxes and laws the colonists found exploitive. The rebellion began with a rejection of English goods. For many American revolutionaries, frugality became synonymous with patriotism. Future President John Adams and his wife Abigail were leaders of the frugality movement.
Frugality, my dear, must be our refuge. I hope the ladies are every day diminishing their ornaments, and the gentlemen too. Let us drink water and eat potatoes, rather than submit to unrighteous domination.
I have neither poverty nor riches, but a heart to be thankful that in such perilous times so large a share of the comforts of life are allotted me.
After years of sacrifice, independence finally came, but with it, the new fondness for materialism. The voices of frugality were drowned out by the sound of money being made. But by the 1840s, those voices were raised again. Inspired by Ralph Waldo Emerson, the Transcendentalists, as they call themselves, believed that a simple life close to nature was the ideal. Utopian communities were formed on this principle over a century before the hippies started theirs. Nathaniel Hawthorne lived at Brook Farm, a utopian community near Harvard. His novel, The Blythedale Romance, is set there. Fruitlands, another transcendental community, was home to a little girl named Louisa May Alcott. Perhaps the best-known transcendental experiment was Henry David Thoreau's solitary retreat to a pond outside Concord, Massachusetts. His book, Walden, still inspires readers today.
Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. Most of the luxuries and many of the so-called comforts of life are not only not indispensable, but positive hindrances to the elevation of mankind.
One of our most beloved leaders, a man with Quaker roots, tried to promote simple living from the White House, but he found his toughest opponent within its walls.
While her sister women sewed bandages and gave their all to country and to death, the wife of the president seemed to have nothing to do but shop.
But in the decades that followed, it was Mary Lincoln and not her husband whose taste set the tone. Mark Twain summed up the credo of what he dubbed the Gilded Age.
What is the chief end of man? To get rich. What is God, the one and only true? Money is God.
Money ruled until it fell from its throne when the stock market collapsed.
Overnight, the richest country in the world had spawned bread lines, soup kitchens, and apple sellers.
The Depression and war rationing brought American frugality to the surface once more, for a while.
Then, with victory, the lid was off. Fill her up. After we get rid of the ration book, America was back on wheels, and rationing was only a memory.
Americans were spending again, but they had to be trained to conspicuously consume. Industry tackled the job with films devoted to getting us to buy more and more.
Just pick up the plates, the button is pressed.
And the dishwashing unit does all the rest.
The glassware, silverware clean themselves.
Washed and dried, they're back on the shelves.
Hello, I'm Mr. Money.
Not everyone wanted us to catch affluenza. Films like this one tried to teach sensible spending habits.
Gee, Mr. Money, do girls have to learn all this about credit too?
But the frugality films just weren't quite as exciting.
You're guilty of pouring your money down a rat hole. You forget that it takes 100 pennies to make a dollar.
Henry found out about impulse buying the hard way.
Maybe it's not surprising which genre ended up calling the tune.
This dream house you and I will share was planned for us by Frigidaire.
The dance was on. But the goods life left some people cold.
Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky little...
By the late 1960s, the tune was changing again. The hippies led yet another rebellion against materialism, starting simple living communes across the country. But when the hippie look became just one more product in the marketplace, the counterculture lost its punch.
So, hippies, don't drop out. Dress up and turn on.
Shirts with European styling.
In the 25 years since the hippies did drop out of sight, materialism has definitely been the prevailing fashion. But now the voices of frugality are being raised again amid the din of consumerism, and their message seems to be reaching a far broader cross-section of Americans. Perhaps this time the impact will be more enduring. But what would happen to our economy if many Americans began to consume less? Would a reduction in spending create an economic crisis?
I don't think that consuming less and saving more would be a bad thing for the economy at all. And in fact, I think it would have a beneficial effect on the American economy because the savings would be invested, the investment would add to productivity, and the next generation of people would be better off than they would otherwise be.
We can think about some of the smaller Northern European economies, which have large numbers of what pollsters have called post-materialist citizens, people who are interested in the environment, they're interested in their quality of life and having time. Those are countries which are doing well and have provided a very high quality of life for their citizens.
Take this country, for example.
The Netherlands has the highest level of post-materialists in the population of any country, and I'd venture to say that they have a much higher quality of life on a whole range of things that, in the polls at least, Americans will say are more important to them, such as spending time with their family and friends, having economic security, having meaningful work and a meaningful life.
Nou, Anneke, ons hele leven wordt er zo ongeveer verfilmd, hè?
Ja, heel veel slaan.
Ja, is het te ver?
Dutch interest in quality instead of quantity has brought this couple celebrity status. In Holland, Rob van Eden and Hanneke van Veen are known affectionately as the tightwad couple. Now, that is.
We spent a lot, we bought everything we wanted, and after some years I started to feel empty. I did not like to live like that anymore, so I tried to convince Rob that another lifestyle, more simple, would be better.
In one way I was already convinced because I was working in an environmental engineering firm and we were making all kinds of scenarios for a clean future of Holland.
In the end, each scenario led to a sobering conclusion. the Dutch environment could only be improved if wasteful overconsumption was sharply reduced.
So I thought, well, you know, I do it for a few months, just to see how low can you go.
They found many ways to reduce their consumption without going low at all. Little changes brought big savings.
When you use tea bags and you switch to a tea egg, from a tea bag to a tea egg, it saves you about $600 in a lifetime.
In time, they cut their spending by 2/3 while finding that the quality of their lives had actually improved. With encouragement from friends, they began publishing a newsletter filled with frugality tips. They were amazed at the response.
One day we couldn't even open our door anymore. There was just a big pile of letters behind it, and all these people saying, yes, yes, finally a paper not about buying, but about not buying, about less instead of more.
Ook een heel bekende situatie waar de banken heel grif op ingaan met creditcards en dergelijke.
Soon they were being asked to speak all around the country.
We talk about the full closets of people, the clutter they have, and everybody can connect to that.
One of their most popular tips is what they call the halving principle. It works for many products. Take shampoo, for example. The next time you wash your hair, try using only half as much as you normally use.
And then when it still works, your hair is clean and you feel comfortable, you use again half of half. And then you go on until it doesn't work anymore. And you think, well, this is not enough. And then you put a little bit extra to it, and then you have the exact amount of shampoo you need. And this is a very good principle, I think.
Recently, Rob and Hanneke translated Your Money or Your Life, the American book about frugality, into Dutch, adapting it to fit their own reality.
The funny thing is we read stories about United States, about tightwads, and they say, sell your second car, you know. And then they say, is this tightwad? Sell your first car. Or give it away, but you don't need a car at all.
But that's easier done in a country like Holland with its separate paths for bicycles and its efficient public transportation.
We are always talking in the Netherlands about the American way of living, but people don't have time to raise their children because they have such a hurry lifestyle.
Peter van Luderveld is the Dutch director of an international organization called the Global Action Plan, or GAP for short. GAP was actually started in the United States, but now finds active participants in many other countries, especially in Holland.
Global Action Plan works through people. It's a real grassrooted organization.
Hoeveel gedeelte van mijn energie die ik in mijn huis gebruik, gaat nou op aan het verwarmen van water?
The basic idea is simple. Friends, neighbors, or co-workers form small groups called eco-teams.
And we are helping them to change their lifestyle towards a more sustainable way of living.
The eco-teams meet monthly and follow a workbook to reduce their household energy and water use, solid waste, and overall consumption of resources.
The eco-team program shows you how to ask the question, do I really need this?
Corinna Van Doren belongs to an eco-team in The Hague.
I first heard about the eco-teams when a friend of mine began to work with GAP, and immediately I thought, hey, that's something for me.
As a result of her participation, she is far more careful about what she buys.
I do this because I want to make a small change, because I hope people will follow my example. In Holland we have a saying, consume minderen. It means to consume less. And that's what I'm trying to do as well. I only want to buy things I really need.
In just 6 years, the number of eco-teams in Holland rose from 40 to 650. A Dutch university study found that members of eco-teams use far fewer resources than their neighbors do and save about $450 a year besides. Clearly, we can learn to consume less wastefully. That's a lesson that's part of the curriculum in one American city.
How much do you guys figure that we spend on our clothing?
This is a very fine Italian tie here. Well, how much are we going to spend on this tie?
About $25. $2 for my tie. Two. That's how much I paid for it. $12 for the pants. $19 for the shoes. How much is that? $48. $48. And this is just to show you that you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money to look professional.
Gerardo Favela frequently shops in thrift stores. He and Nate McKay aren't teachers. They work for the Consumer Credit Counseling Service, bringing a one-of-a-kind program to thousands of students in San Diego area schools.
Our volunteer board of trustees saw a dramatic rise in bankruptcies, a dramatic rise in debt, and they said, when does it stop?
She hopes the bucks will stop here at Castle Park High School, where students are taught to stretch a dollar until it screams. They don't graduate until they've learned to manage money wisely. It's called the Money Masters program.
As we ask students, how many of you own your own credit card? The number of students' hands that go up in the air is rising every semester.
This, despite record levels of credit card debt and a recent study which found that 80% of Americans don't understand basic financial principles. Tanya Orozco is glad her daughter Anita went through the Money Masters program.
She seems to be more aware of how money's managed. She's a lot more understanding about when I don't have money to buy her things or when we can't afford something than she was before.
It really helped me understand a lot more about my mom's finances.
Tanya can't wait until Anita's younger sister Naomi takes it too.
Every commercial she sees, she wants me to buy that item. She'll call me into the living room to look at the TV to show this item that she wants that's being advertised, and it can be really frustrating.
Mommy, can you buy me this movie?
I don't know, honey. Let's see, okay?
It's $1 off.
Okay, we've got to start making less trips to the store.
As a single parent, Tanya knows what it's like to struggle financially. Not long ago, she sought out the advice of consumer credit counselors herself.
A lot of the debt came from me wanting to buy things for my children. I've started learning to say no to certain things.
Each month, Tanya and her daughters go over the family bills together.
I don't want them to grow up and end up with a lot of debt like I'm trying to get out of right now.
What is it?
Money, $1.
It's $1. Okay. $1. Otra vez. $1. The eagle is on the dollar bill.
Consumer credit counselors say even preschoolers aren't too young to learn to save instead of spend.
Esta es una tarjeta de crédito. Parents come back and ask us, what are you teaching my little boy or little girl? Because my little boy or little girl is now telling me that I have to save my money. And they'll ask me, like, is that really something that we need? Yeah, what you do is you get your money and you put it inside the piggy bank. Cuidas tu dinero en tu alcancía.
How many of you have more things than you need in your house? Sometimes I'm invited to speak in classrooms like Gerardo does. And when I do, it gives me a new sense of optimism.
I have clothes that I don't need. I have everything in my closet. I can't get rid of it.
School children often admit to having more than they need, consuming less, sharing more with those less fortunate throughout the world, protecting the earth. Those things just make sense to them. After all, it's their future. There are many ways to simplify, and none of the stories in this program are meant to be a model for everyone. But whether you want to save the environment or simply save money, and whether you take small steps or giant strides, I think you'll find that escaping from affluenza will leave you feeling more fulfilled. It might also leave the world in better shape for generations to come. Thanks for watching. I'm Wanda Urbanska.